Greetings and welcome to another episode of The Bright Orange Future. This is Cory Clipston, your co-host, along with my real-life big brother, Matt Garrity, dialing in from Seattle. Matty G, you there?
I am present and accounted for. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, it's great to see you. It was a nice long week already in the Bitcoin space with the price pump sort of beginning over the weekend. We're back up around 11,000, so that's pretty exciting for folks in my area.
Yeah, things are happening. I feel like there's some excitement in the water here.
Yeah, there's a buzz in the air. People like Bitcoin again. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I mean, with that, like, I am absolutely thrilled at the guest that we're bringing on today. It's a longtime reporter in the space named Billy Bambrough. He mostly writes for Forbes these days, and we've become acquainted over the last couple months. I've been reading his pieces for years, and he's actually got a pretty interesting and diverse background and diverse set of interests. And I thought we'd bring him on to just talk about kind of the state of the media inside and outside of the Bitcoin space, and then just kind of carry it forward and talk about where things are going and kind of how the media interplays with society and governments and in the financial system, and just get some of his views there. And of course, we promised him that we'd talk about a little bit of some music and some culture, so we'll hit some of that as usual.
That's how we get them in here. Yeah.
Exactly. You dangle the music, and then you get them to talk about things that they are paid to do. So it's great. So let's do it. Let's, with no further ado, let's get Billy right in here. And Billy, you are officially, I can't unmute you. Unmute you. There you go. All right. You're good. Nope, he's still muted.
Try it again.
All right, 1 second. And there we go.
Hey,
we got him. Okay.
Beautiful.
Hi, Cory. I'm Matt.
Hey, Billy. How's it going?
Very well. How are you guys?
Good. So, I mean, in the space where I spend all my days, which is also basically what you do, we're in different aspects of it. Sometimes you're super popular with Bitcoiners, and sometimes you're so not. And I just wanted to kind of hear more about you and your background and where you came into this. And like, I'll just give a hint. Most of the people that would ever criticize you for Bitcoin haven't been in it for nearly as long as you and don't care about it as much as you. So that's kind of the preface. But yeah, let's get to know you a little bit. Where are you from? How'd you get into journalism?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm from the UK. I grew up just near London, not quite London, but pretty much London, and I live in London now. So I mean, for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency stuff, London has been pretty important for a long time. There's always been a lot of stuff going on here. I remember back in 2012, 2013 kind of time, there were a lot of Bitcoin conferences in London and Dublin that I attended. Met lots of interesting people at that kind of thing. And I've kind of been around the space since then, moving around the business journalism kind of beat in London. So while I started writing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency stuff all the way back in 2012, when I worked on a trade magazine here in London, a banking magazine. But then after that, I've had different jobs in the media. And so have had at times less connection to the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency world. But 2 or so years ago, I started writing for Forbes on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency stuff right after the 2017 big price explosion that really propelled Bitcoin to the mainstream and made the space a lot more interesting and a lot more interest in it from people all around the world. So it's been great this last 2 years, really covering the industry so closely, and all the big developments like Facebook Libra and all these kind of things that have pushed Bitcoin and cryptocurrency awareness and acceptance forward. It's been super interesting, really, to follow it all the way back from the early days.
That's some serious bona fides there. Back in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, and I like in hindsight, I do wish I'd just stuck with Bitcoin stuff all the way from then. So my first introduction to Bitcoin was my first job out of university after my journalism degree, was writing for a banking magazine. here in London. My editor was very skeptical of Bitcoin and anything cryptocurrency related, really anything digital related. He's a cash, gold, traditional kind of banker type guy, and just broadly doesn't understand the internet and the digital world and where we're headed in the future. But when I was on staff, he'd heard mutterings of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and what they would do, and he assigned me to take on the beat really and find out more about it and report on it and get to know it and really try and report on how much of a threat it could be to the banking industry and whether the banking industry needed to sit up and take notice. I reported back that yes, they absolutely did, and it was, Bitcoin was a technology that's going to change the world and fundamentally about how we think about anything that exists digitally, and how it makes digital scarcity a possibility where it just hadn't existed before, and how this will in time come to impact and affect all realms of digital life, which is increasingly just becoming all life. And he was very skeptical of all of this and kind of said, well, banks don't really need to worry about it so much, so let's put it on the back burner and not think about it. And this is around the time where, or going into the Bitcoin price rise up to, I think it was about $1,000 per Bitcoin, and then it crashed back down to about 200 in early 2014, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And everyone said, oh, Bitcoin's over, it's all dead, it's all gone. Billy, that was a waste of time. You're working on that for a while, so let's move on to something else. And it was around then I actually got a different job, and I left the banking world specifically and started working for a financial radio station here in London, reporting on just wider business stuff. So still doing a bit of banking, but really just looking at the business world and stuff more broadly. And then I had a few more jobs around that in the intervening years before coming back to Bitcoin and stuff full time a couple of years ago. So it's been a bit of a around the houses route to it, but the whole time I have been very on board with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies broadly and blockchain technology. But I think because of that intervening bit where I took almost a hiatus from specific Bitcoin reporting between about 2014 and 2018, the industry changed a hell of a lot. There was a lot of influx of new people coming into it. I mean, the global awareness just went through the roof when the Bitcoin price exploded in 2017. And coming back to it after that, I was kind of seen as somewhat of an outsider, even though that I'd been around tangentially to the industry for some time, and certainly I do think I have quite a solid grasp of not only the technology but the workings of the finance industry and how Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is going to evolve within that.
So I got a question for you. In all of that time, the early days, and then obviously the last few years, what's the most interesting story or maybe interview subject that sticks out in your mind? It's like, wow, that was memorable.
Yeah, it's a good one. There's an art dealer here in London who has transitioned from selling art or being an art broker to being a Bitcoin broker. I've been talking to her this week actually about some things that she's working on, and hopefully some good stories from that will be on Forbes sooner or later. But her kind of transition from, she started putting artwork on the blockchain first, and you could buy pieces of super expensive art on the blockchain and own little pieces of them, and they found this worked really well for getting people without big piles of cash who wanted to invest in art as a store of value. They started doing this on like Andy Warhol paintings and things. And then she kind of transitioned because of the success of doing this kind of stuff on blockchain. She had so many people connected to the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency community who are interested in this art on the blockchain, saying, are you able to hook us up with any Bitcoin and cryptocurrency buyers or sellers? Because we either want to buy a lot or sell a lot of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and we don't want to do it via exchanges because of the fees, and we'd rather do it via you with someone that you trust. And this kind of evolution of how the art dealership and art brokerage works in a very similar way to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency brokerage, and it's about what she does is link very high profile or wealthy buyers to very wealthy sellers who want to move quite large amounts of Bitcoin. And well, she's been telling me this week about some of the problems that they've been facing. I'm hopefully going to write that up as a story on Forbes soon, so stay tuned for that one. But yeah, I mean, she's a super interesting person. It's just not like up until a few years ago, she has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but she's just taken these art dealership skills and just completely transposed it into the Bitcoin world, and just now does with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies exactly what she used to do for very high value art.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There's a male version of this, which is a guy named Anthony Ritosa. That's basically just like an heir to olive oil fortunes somewhere down in southeastern Europe, and he's been running these family high net worth conferences for 20 years or something like that, with Middle East and New Yorkers and Londoners, etc. And yeah, I remember in 2018, like he was all over the space trying to broker these big Bitcoin deals and getting involved in cryptocurrency. I think I know the woman that you're talking about, but I won't tease it until your piece comes out. But she's come across my radar as well. I'm very interested to learn a little bit more about her background.
Oh yeah,
and so she's selling pieces of ownership of famous art.
Yeah, exactly. They did it with an Andy Warhol one a couple of years ago, and I think they've done it with some others as well. I did speak to her about the Andy Warhol one at the time, and so yeah, like they've tokenized it, and so you can, if you do own, get some of these Andy Warhol tokens, it means you own a certain percentage of whichever artwork that is for that particular token.
That is really, really cool. I have not heard of anything like that. So my mind is getting expanded right now. I like the idea of that for so many things, like this new way of investing, of buying a piece of something that has value, that has had value for a long time, but using it through the blockchain technology, through the facilitation of Bitcoin.
Well, you'll love this, Matt. So
that's kind of like, whoa.
I'll jump in here. I got to jump in here and say you don't need a blockchain for any of this.
Oh,
it's just fractional ownership.
Oh, okay.
That's all it is. So it's literally, there's no need for a blockchain.
But they're using Bitcoin to
not using Bitcoin at all. They're just the companies that are doing this have used. Sorry, I'm going to go maximalist here. The companies that are doing this have used blockchain as a buzzword to be able to raise venture money, to go and sort of redo something that's been around for 40 years. The first guy to do this actually was David Bowie. He sold off Bowie bonds, which was like the rights to the residuals from his.
Are you talking about the David Bowie?
Yes. Yeah, he did this in the 80s. This is not a new thing at all.
Oh, okay.
And there's been fractional ownership of.
I know he's gone through some phases, but
yeah, I'm not surprised that the subject of this interview started out in that space, and then after the buzz wore off and people were like, wow, that actually isn't new. I just didn't know about the previous 30 years of doing the same thing, that she transitioned over to trying to sell Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I think that's a very fair point, but so much of what technology companies do is reinvent the traditional services. What Uber Pool is reinventing the bus. Lots of these things are using technology to slightly improve a very old or existing concept.
100%. No, I totally agree. And like whatever somebody needs to do to raise money to digitize health records and improve real estate and government services, I'm with it, man. If I never have to go to a government office and get a stamp on something again, and you can just put that digital, like I will invest in your blockchain company. Oh man. So Billy, I'd love to hear a little bit about just kind of this cultural moment, and you being in the UK, but also having a lot of exposure and experience and friends in the US as well. And just kind of telling us a little bit about where we are in time here in 2020, in your view, and pepper in some observations about the media's role and position and how that has changed over, the previous decade or two.
I mean, it's such a evolving topic that it's very hard to kind of capture the moment of it, because it does just seem to be changing so much. I mean, with the coronavirus crisis at the moment, which has really hit the media industry very hard in a very strange way, because readership on everything, absolutely everything, is up, but advertisement is hugely down. Any kind of print sales for anything is hugely down, and the print sales for lots and lots of the media is still where they make almost all of their money. Certainly here in the UK, the national papers, and I imagine it's similar for lots of the US as well, with the exception of something perhaps like the New York Times. Lots of newspapers and traditional media companies are still very dependent on their print publications, which have just been effectively wiped out by the coronavirus pandemic. So that's causing this huge shift in the media, which we have seen elsewhere as well, of this sudden move to even further digital. That kind of slow trend has been happening for the last 20, 30 years. But we've suddenly, in 3 months, taken about a 50-year step, and nothing is set up for it and nothing is prepared for it. And the media industry is now in this very sudden state of flux, where the crisis hasn't even really hit yet. Everyone can see it coming, but because of the huge amounts of stimulus money that governments all over the world are pouring into everything, everything's kind of just continuing as normal for the moment. But as soon as that shuts off, there's going to be an earthquake in the media company, where lots of publications close, lots of them have to completely reorient themselves. I mean, lots of them had already been trying to reorient themselves around events. Publications like CoinDesk make a huge amount of their money from Consensus and other big kind of events that they put on every year. And that's one of their primary drivers of revenue. And these events are effectively been called off the next year or so, almost indefinitely. So that's going to change the media landscape even more than already. But this is all part of this broader shift to digital, for which the big tech companies are very involved in and have been always trying to put themselves on the periphery of, saying we're not publishers, we're just a platform, we're not responsible for the content that we host. But of course, Google specifically, but also the social media companies as well, do gain a lot of users and revenue from the kind of content that they are hosting. So this kind of change as well has been a long time coming, but I think certainly around the US election this year, we're going to see an absolute firestorm of hatred directed towards the big tech companies for allowing any kind of opinions or even news on their site that isn't that some people feel could push politics in the way they don't want it to be pushed, regardless of whether it is fake news or whether it is valid opinion or whatever. So there's this very strange kind of turmoil going on within the media industry, where no one has figured out yet how to recreate the gatekeeper type sentinels that the traditional media industry used to be, and while there was regulation there, trying to put into law what media companies could print and say. Really, it was largely down to code of ethics and based on just journalist goodwill to not publish things that were blatant mistruths. And so there's just been this insane shift in the last 2 decades that has been hugely accelerated over the last few months, that we're still dealing with and wrestling with, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, as far as I can see. But I think that fundamentally, the way the internet works is part of the problem, and I think it's a problem that has an awful lot of good sides to it too. It's not a problem that's necessarily one we should be trying to eradicate entirely, because if we do that, then it means there's going to be a whole lot less potential for the internet to do an awful lot of good, and removing that risk of the internet doing bad things does also remove the possibility of it of it being used as a tool to do great things. So it's a hugely difficult time for the media, where neither the sort of feisty, agile new media businesses like, say, BuzzFeed or something like that, they're struggling. The old media is struggling as well. And even like if you look at the New York Times is often named as a big success story in digital media, while they have managed to stop the huge losses the company is making from growing their digital subscriptions, they've begun to cater even more for their particular readership. And we're seeing an even sort of more polarized world come about, where you're either on the New York Times team or you're not, and it's creating more problems seemingly than they're able to fix. So it's very interesting. And you know, with my work for Forbes, where we're not, you know, no subscription, no paywall kind of thing, anyone can read it, but it does mean that we're fighting for eyeballs all the time against every other media company that's in the same boat and wants people to read their stories and come to them, and trying to walk that line between writing things that people want to read and are going to generate ad revenue, but also doing the kind of in-depth quality reporting that every journalist wants to do, is a very difficult line to walk.
How did you come to be reporting for Forbes? Was that something that you pursued and saw that they could use your talents and pitched it, or did they come to you? Or
no, I went to them. It was almost a classic case of media nepotism. I used to work, so Forbes acquired a London-based tech publication called The Memo back in 2017, I think. And I used to work with one of the senior reporters at The Memo, who then became a Forbes editor. And I used to work with him at a London-based newspaper called City AM. And I reached out to him and said, I'd like to write for Forbes about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, because I'm really interested in them, and I think Forbes readers would be interested in them. I mean, Forbes already had a thriving cryptocurrency and Bitcoin writer base, so they were all already doing good work. But they took me on as a London-based writer, and it was really through my connections with someone that already worked there. I reached out to him, and he had worked with me previously, so he knew I was a capable journalist and happy to give me a shot at it. So
that's cool.
So yeah, like it's.
And then I was just thinking as you were talking, like, about, like, do you seek out, you know, when you're talking to somebody or reporting on somebody or reporting on a circumstance that's very bullish, say, for Bitcoin and for the price, because to me it seems very mercurial how to predict what's going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in your circumstance you could come upon someone who's like, oh yeah, bull, and then, you know, the next day you take a call and it's the opposite, or it's
absolutely,
you know, just like, how do you square those things, and where do you use your own intelligence to just be like, look, this is what I think, you know?
Sure.
Like,
yeah, I mean, as a more traditional reporter, I do try to inject my own opinion as little as possible. I mean, the pieces that I'm writing are labeled as opinion pieces, so they are, you know, I am permitted somewhat to use my own opinions in it somewhat, but really, I mean, I always have approached any kind of news writing with the idea that is the person that you're quoting, is the person whose opinion you're writing down and reporting to other people, are they a decision maker? Are they someone that does have influence within the industry? Right. So say if the chief executive of a Bitcoin exchange says something that they think that, I mean, they're basing that on information that they have. Ideally, that they're seeing more Bitcoin buyers than sellers coming into the space on their exchange or something like that at the moment. So they could use that kind of knowledge to make a price prediction, or if they just control a lot of money, if they are a fund manager that does control billions of dollars, then what they say in their opinion really does have a big effect over the market. So really, if they're a decision maker and an influencer in the traditional sense of the word, not as in a social media, although social media influencers can make things happen too, but if they're a more traditional kind of influencer, then I think their opinion is valid, and if they say they expect something or see something, then I think it's worth reporting on. However, there is a big problem in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space that lots of the people that are involved in it have lots of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency holdings. So it's very much in their interest for the price to go up. There was a great interview here in the UK a few years ago now on morning television, like one of those breakfast television shows. A short seller come on who said, I really want to, I'm betting against the market. I want to see the market go down. And I think that the market is going to crash, so I bet that it is going to go down. And the people on this breakfast show who had no real like business or finance experience or weren't journalists of that area, they were shocked. They were like, well, how can you say that? Why are you betting that it's going to happen? This would cause like misery for lots of people. And he's saying, well, I just think it's going to happen, so I bet that it will happen. I don't think it did happen actually after this guy said that he made that bet, so he was wrong, but he shorted the market quite a lot. And always within finance, especially these kind of decisions, people are they're putting their money one way or another, and they want then that to happen. And so when they talk to the media and they say what they expect to happen, it also means what they want to happen because they have an interest in it. So it's difficult to do that. But I do try to keep pieces that I write balanced. So if it is a bullish headline or a bearish headline, then I will have other quotes throughout the piece, ideally, saying the opposite and saying this could happen, or this other person thinks that it could go this way, because really no one knows. It's very, very hard to predict anything for sure. The people that are getting paid millions a year and have access to all the data and information, they still get it wrong, and they're the most clued in guys going. So it's not an easy game to play. A lot of the people that I talk to when I ask them about predictions for the price say I don't make predictions. It's a fool's game. It's going to be wrong more than half of the time, so it's not even worth having a shot at it.
But you get more clicks if you are very exaggerated about your calls.
Yeah.
More clicks and followers.
Like to read things that are that confirm their own beliefs, and if they say, "Oh, I think it's going to go up," and if some hedge fund manager or whatever also thinks that, then they're excited to see that, and they want to see that as well. But I think it's just important for the media industry to maintain a balance there. There's nothing wrong with writing positive or negative stories, as long as you are doing so without fear or favor, as long as you're doing it honestly and in good faith and not trying to move the market. I mean, that's another thing that I found very interesting in the Bitcoin space, that I get criticized because I don't hold any Bitcoin. People see me as an amateur, someone who doesn't know what they're doing, a no coiner. I can't believe that you don't have any Bitcoin. What are you doing reporting on this thing if you don't even have any? Well, I don't have any because I don't want to have a stake in the game. I don't want to be. I don't want that to influence my reporting. Right. And something like publications, old school publications like the Wall
That's
Street.
Quite a sacrifice you're making.
Well,
potentially.
I mean, to be honest, and I've said this many times, I'm not especially bullish on the price. I don't necessarily see the price going up in the way a lot of other people do, even with increased adoption. I mean, we've seen so many things over the last few months of huge amounts of adoption. Grayscale's fund is becoming increasingly popular, and while they don't necessarily, it's not a direct ownership of Bitcoin, it's a very good indicator of interest. Things like Visa and MasterCard all moving further towards cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, digital dollar, all these kind of things I would have thought would be very good for Bitcoin, but they don't seem to be having the impact on the price that some people think they like. If you'd have told people that a year ago, they'd have said, oh, well, if that happens, the price will definitely go up. And it hasn't. It's gone up a bit, but not as much as I think some people would have expected it to. So even back in 2012, 2013, under $1,000 per Bitcoin, sometimes as low as like $200 per Bitcoin, I didn't buy any then. It seemed overvalued then. I didn't understand why it had a certain value. And I don't necessarily think increased adoption will mean, I don't subscribe to the stock to flow model, especially that just because it's a scarce asset and that more people want to hold it, it'll necessarily go up. I don't think it necessarily will happen. It could happen, and I don't want to say it won't happen because it might do. But I think with assets like Bitcoin, it is very much just based on what someone else is willing to pay for it. And that might well go up significantly, but I do think it could also go down significantly.
Let me tell you something to give you a little bit of comfort, Billy. You're actually very long Bitcoin because you are spending your days in it, and you're going to be one of the people that knows the most about it and knows the most people. And if this space continues to expand, you and your career are essentially kind of a levered bet on Bitcoin, because you'll be able to write about it and you'll be able to have shows and write books and access people for whatever you need to do down the future. So I often, it's funny, for the first time I'm actually not following my own advice that I followed throughout my entire career, which is like, whatever you're working on, don't own too much of the asset tied to that. So like if you're working at Morgan Stanley, like diversify your portfolio a little bit. Don't own just a ton of Morgan Stanley stock, right? Diversify out of that as soon as you get the shares, because otherwise you're double leveraged. Your job, your livelihood, and your portfolio go in the shitter if Morgan Stanley tanks. I don't really follow that advice with Bitcoin because I just, I personally just think of Bitcoin as money. So like it is what it is for me. But using that theory that I followed until very recently, you would be in the right, which is you're very levered on Bitcoin as far as it, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin being your career. So it kind of makes sense to diversify out of that with, investments or holdings or whatever it is. So, don't feel bad. That's actually the right way to do things, unless you are insanely infected in the brain by orange pill.
Right. I think I am already, but I've managed to, at least I think it.
Either that, or this is like the best boating accident cover ever, because you're on record as not owning any Bitcoin, but you actually have a huge cash somewhere.
Now.
Which is probably true.
That could change in the future, but no plans yet.
Look, CIA, MI6. Look, I said many times I have no Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Genius. Well, Billy, let's get back to some of these business models. I thought that was fascinating what you're talking about. So obviously you've got ad-driven eyeballs, you've got subscriptions, you've got events. What are some other ways that media companies might be able to make money in the future, in a post-coronavirus, or if this thing is with us for decades? Like, how are they going to make money?
I mean, it's a big question. If I had a good answer to it, I could probably sell it to some media companies and they'd be very happy to hear it. I honestly don't know. At the moment, the best way, I think, still seems to be digital ad revenue. Still seems to be the best way for lots of them. I mean, in addition to that, you've got companies, and I think this could become perhaps a bigger one, companies like the Bloomberg model. So Bloomberg makes almost all of its money from selling the Bloomberg terminal, which lots of people in the finance industry really like, and it lets them have access to like up to the second information on everything. So they're always the fastest person there. And Bloomberg uses this revenue from the Bloomberg terminal to fund the media side of the business. The media side, I expect, I don't know the details, but I would very much expect it makes no money whatsoever. They spend an enormous amount of money. You'll often see Bloomberg articles with 3 or 4 journalists listed contributing to one article that's not even very long. They have a huge amount of staff that churn out a lot of very good content that they obviously spend an awful lot of time on. But I can't imagine it makes much money. But what it has done is made the name Bloomberg super famous, and everyone knows what Bloomberg is, and it's very important to the financial industry now. And that has helped sales of the Bloomberg terminal. So that kind of model where media companies aren't just media companies. And we're seeing it somewhat with the kind of premium model that media companies do, that the basic site's free, but then for the good stuff, you've got to pay more to get it. But I've often found that the good stuff isn't really all that good or different from the other stuff, and you can generally find it for free elsewhere anyway. So I'm not really convinced on that particular model, because it seems to just be mixing the two similar things too much, and people don't feel like they're getting good value. for media companies that do vastly different things, that are kind of data companies or catering to someone other than general news consumers or media consumers, that could be a way to kind of funnel lots of cash into a media organization that works without having to go for clicks all the time. Or I think another big one is going to be that we'll see the big tech companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, even Netflix, starting to do much more news themselves and the actual news creation, instead of just hosting the news from other websites. So I think that's a big possibility. And then thirdly, you've got the possibility of cryptocurrencies, and we were seeing it slightly with the likes of Brave browser and the kind of stuff that they're doing, to pay people for reading the basic attention token that Brave has, that gives people cryptocurrency tokens for the amount of time they spend on certain pages and ads that they see on there, which I think is a much more wholesome way of the advertising model working, but it is still basically the advertisement model, but with better technology. So there's a lot of different possibilities where the media industry could go from here, but it's going to be very difficult, and all based on regulation. You know, if the 2020 US election really is as bad as it could be, and fake news flying everywhere, and Congress and lawmakers and regulators having to be much stricter on the kind of news that gets put online and then gets shared on social media, I mean, that could just change everything and turn everything on its head in a short amount of time. So weird time for the media industry. It's always weird times, to be honest, but now feels especially weird.
One thing that comes to mind for me is just how little of the legacy apparatus you actually need to be able to create and distribute. Right. So you've got Joe Rogan with a staff of like 2, right, doing hundreds of millions of dollars deal with Spotify, and all these YouTubers have been doing it for a decade, almost decade and a half now. And any of us can start a podcast now, and it's still early days, right? There's like 1.5 million podcasts, and there's 50 million blogs. So it's still super early to do what we're doing here today. And I wonder if that's kind of the thing. It's just going to be citizen journalists, your Tim Pools of the world, and people out there just covering stories. And like maybe Billy, you'll just be a brand. It'll be billybambrough.com, and you'll have some shows that you do, and you'll have a Substack or whatever it is, right? Your daily email newsletter, and it doesn't take much to have that revenue just of people that want to hear from you and your voice, your opinion, but also your reporting, and they trust you and your sources. And
I mean, it was a fundamental idea of the internet when the internet was first created, that it would allow these kind of things and make it possible. But the internet has been internet 2.0, that is really controlled by the Silicon Valley giants. It has just seen them take over and everyone else get pushed out. There was the theory, I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but you only need 1,000 fans. That if you have 1,000 people paying for your content or for whatever you've made or created, then that's all you need. You don't need to cater to 500,000 people around the world. You don't need all of those customers. You just need 1,000 people that really like whatever it is you're selling, whether it's news or baseball caps or whatever else. Like, as long as you've got that 1,000 people that will buy your stuff every year or even every day, or come to your shows or whatever, that's what you need to make a living. And the internet was really, originally, people thought it would allow that kind of thing to happen much more. But what it's done in practice, at least so far, is just allowed a huge more concentration of wealth and power in the form of these big tech companies. But with Internet 3.0 and a much more distributed, decentralized internet, we might actually see that kind of internet take off. And we like you say, with Substack and that kind of idea, almost back to the early 2000s blogging game, where people would just set up a blog and they'd do some stuff themselves, and it would maybe get traction. It just doesn't really happen anymore. It does happen with some social media accounts, but it's so that's really just serving those particular social media companies, less so than the creators themselves. So it's hopefully we will see a return to that kind of internet model. And I think cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology can really help that to develop. But it will require, I think, at least somewhat smashing the hold that Google, Amazon, Facebook kind of companies have on the internet currently, and they're not going to let go easily. They like this way of working, and it works for them. So,
well, that number's come down, because I know in the in the mid 2000s, those of us in the music industry, we would talk about how you needed basically 10,000 fans. Right. If you had 10,000 fans, worldwide.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a new thing, that you could have them worldwide, that you could, that you would have a career, you could tour, you'd be supported, you could go have a really nice little livelihood going on. But I think it's interesting to hear that number kind of come down to 1,000 for,
I'm not sure who coined it, but it definitely was a thing back in the 90s or so, where people thought this is what the internet was going to do, the phrase that was thrown around.
Yeah.
Hey, so we definitely want to touch on music a little bit, so I got a way to get into that. Billy, is there a band that you love where you were one of the first 1,000 fans? And if not, is there a band that you wish you were one of the first 1,000 fans?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I don't think I bet I haven't, like I don't discover new music in a very like efficient way. I come to music after everyone else, like singing. And I get the stuff that I like, and I listen to it a lot, and then some new band or artist will blow up, and then I'll discover them years later and enjoy them then. But I'm never first to this kind of thing.
Well, what's an artist that's meant a lot to you over a long period of time, that's like stood the test of time for you?
I think it's so hard, and there's so many. I think I'd go with one of my favorite bands that my brother introduced me to when I must have been 14 or so. It was actually the first live gig I went to was a Led Zeppelin tribute band, and Led Zeppelin was a big part of my life for a long time, and yeah, love Led Zeppelin. And I mean, if I'd have been around to see Robert Plant and Led Zeppelin back in the day, then that would have been great. But kind of missed the boat on that one.
That's awesome.
True legends right there.
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin. Good job, big brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my brother even had proper Robert Plant hair as well at one point. I think he was in a band, and they wanted to be Zeppelin, and it just seemed very cool to me at the time, and stayed with me since.
Yeah.
Interesting parallels here with our story. Matt having been a local rock star in Seattle and introducing me to most of my favorite bands.
Right. Well, there you go.
It's funny, YouTube served me up, I have no idea why, but they served me up a suggested video last week that was like, why is John Bonham the best drummer ever? And I went down like a 2-hour Bonham rabbit hole.
Nice.
Oh my God. Like, I didn't realize like how important it was, and how complicated the time signatures and rhythms that they used, and why it drives things forward, and why it always feels like you're on a fucking train when you listen to a Zeppelin song, and it's just like energizing. And the complexity and the math and the skill, it's just absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. Well put. A band like Led Zeppelin is almost unfair, because you're talking about geniuses at every single position. Like when you're, the bass player is a genius, Jimmy Page is a genius, Robert Plant is a genius singer, obviously, the drummer. Yeah, exactly. It's just like
the first time I heard Moby Dick was in my friend's garage in the town I grew up in, just north of London, and I guess I was like 14-ish, and yeah, just blew me away, and loved it.
Yeah, I remember having Led Zeppelin 2 on vinyl on a little portable record player. This was in Northern California. Cory was about, I was about almost 11. You were probably like 4 or 5. Remember when we were living in Northern California for that brief time? We had that, we were renting that house, and it had a swimming pool. And I had my first
Monticello, baby. Monticello.
And I had my first guitar and my first record player, and my first Led Zeppelin record all at the same time. And I would play that thing every single day, like 3-4 times. I mean, both sides. It was just so, it was addictive. I just couldn't get enough of it. And it definitely, so I'm with you. I'm with you with that being a big part of my musical sensibility, you know, coming from those rhythms and just that spirit, you know, just being so contagious, so rock. Yeah.
We should just do this the whole show.
Just the full 8-minute version.
Absolutely. Love it. All right, enough of that.
That was exciting. I didn't know what was happening there.
Yeah, well, now that I learned you can share sound through Zoom,
Look
like
at
that's
this
all
guy.
it's all I want to do basically all the time.
Oh my God.
You know, Billy, I'm sure you've probably run across Peter McCormick's show, fellow Brit over there doing What Bitcoin Did. He recently had Keith Levine from The Clash on his show because Keith hit him up and said he's like a huge Bitcoiner. And,
Wow.
And so they did this whole show about how Bitcoin is punk rock and just like how well it fits being like, you know, protest currency, protest music, that kind of thing. And like, and basically, you know, the TLDRs or TLDL, too long didn't listen, is like, if Bitcoin had been around in the 70s, he would have done that. But there was no other outlet.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I totally missed that one. I'll have to go back and listen. My podcast list is just, it seems there's more stuff added to it every day than I actually managed to get through. But that one certainly, I think sounds worthwhile.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I took a walk around the neighborhood and listened to that one. Just very, very smart guy. Who would you, what musician out there would you love to see come out and say, yep, Bitcoin's the thing. I love Bitcoin.
It's got to be with someone that just has a massive platform that you wouldn't expect. Like,
Madonna just goes to the mat and is like, I'm on Bitcoin all the time.
I think people would just assume they'd been hacked or whatever on whichever social media platform they said it. No one would
It's
believe
funny
it.
because the first person I thought of was Kanye.
He's already in favor of Bitcoin. He's been about Bitcoin for
Is he?
5
Okay.
years. Yeah.
All right. So
That might not be a net positive for us.
no,
right now.
it's just the first person. Yeah. Likely. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think it will happen though. Like, I mean, for one thing, well, I mean, back in 2017, lots of musicians and celebrities put their names and faces on things that were basically scams related to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And some of them, Steven Seagal, I think, got in trouble recently with the SEC for saying some wannabe Bitcoin 2.0 type thing was a great investment, and he didn't, like, obviously he knew nothing about it. And I mean, it's always going to happen that if it's popular and if it's going to make money, then celebrities and people with big platforms will be used to promote it. So the next wave of that is going to happen, and you know, whether it comes from them accepting Bitcoin as you know, to pay for shows or whatever, or just they advocate it as a store of value. Like, I think that is going to happen slowly but surely, and then probably very suddenly.
Love it.
Hey, did you as you're covering the financial workings of the world globally, what's going on with Brexit these days? And I mean, it just seems like that just got
somewhat put that on hold. It's it went from last year being on the front page of all newspapers for every day for indefinitely, to being pushed off by coronavirus. I mean, it did move along a little bit towards the start of this year, in that the UK has now officially left the European Union. So we're now in the transition phase. So nothing's changed, but we are no longer part of the European Union, which is, you know, a significant development, something that a lot of people said would never happen, even back in 2016 when the vote happened. A lot of people said we never would actually get to this stage of actually leaving, but that has now happened. And the pressure now is on for a trade deal with the UK to sign a trade deal with the EU by the end of this year. So we've only got a few months to sign what would probably be, at least in terms of like page length, the biggest trade deal of all time. And I've no idea how they're getting on. Like back in some of my other reporting jobs, I would have been following this kind of stuff much more closely. But it's something that I stay kind of abreast of, but don't have a huge amount of insight into these days. But I still do find the sort of political minutiae of it and the maneuverings of Brussels and Westminster to be very interesting, and the politicians who kind of know that Brexit is a poison chalice, like it is going to damage the country, but they still have to try and sell it to people anyway because it's what people want, and that's how democracy works. Unfortunately, if Turkeys vote for Christmas, then they're going to have to get shot. It's a very sad state of affairs. But if people do vote for what's bad for them, then that's democracy, and what's bad for them is going to happen. So yeah, seeing politicians try and maneuver it to sell it to people and to make it work is very interesting. I'm not as sort of doom fearing as other people on this. Like, I didn't vote for Brexit, but I don't think it will necessarily be a disaster. I think it can work, and the UK can find its place within not only Europe but the rest of the world. But it's not going to be easy, and yeah, it's going to take a while.
Do you think there's a strong likelihood that you'll see much closer ties between the US and the UK as a result?
Yeah, I think that's likely. I mean, the shared language thing is the biggest thing that makes that more possible and more likely. And the language thing has always been a strange point of contention with the rest of Europe, who kind of resent that everything that Europe does has to be done in English because of the UK and then because of America, and they get very sore about it. But it is going to happen that the UK-US trade deal, which I expect will eventually be signed, will increase those links. And politicians here in the UK used to talk about it. I don't know if it was a thing in the US, but they called it the special relationship between the UK and the US, and they were very proud of that fact and that ability that it gave for the UK to really punch above its weight on global affairs, because we had the support of the US in a lot of things, and that has certainly changed under Donald Trump, and I think will likely change in the next few years. But I think long term it is going to be a big part of British foreign policy and strategy is going to be West, not East.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've already got Harry and Meghan over here in Los Angeles, and it seems like we should probably just pick up Windsor Castle and put it down in Bel Air or something. We need some royalty out here, I think. I mean, Wests and Kardashians aside, like, we don't really have anyone to truly look up to that way.
Oh yeah, we've got those two royal ambassadors now in LA, so they'll be forging ahead, and
yeah, it's the kind of links that we need. Yeah, it does show you the power that a woman has over her husband, when it's like, so you're like royalty, I got to get back into acting.
I actually prefer my part-time job as a being in this world.
There's this sitcom that I think is just perfect. So why don't you just give all that up?
You can see it. Yeah, almost like a Royal Arrested Development.
That's awesome. It's funny. Well, listen, Billy, this has been just an awesome conversation. Time flew. We're at our limit here, but would love to have you back on in a few months, and super happy we got to spend this time.
Great talking to you both. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Billy. We'll talk soon, man.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Billy.
Well, now at the end of this, I obviously need to shill my company, swanbitcoin.com. So if you haven't checked it out yet, anyone in the US, You can hop on there for automated purchases of Bitcoin. It's automated pull from bank account, automatic purchase of Bitcoin, free automatic withdrawal to self-custody. We're the only service in the US that has that. Actually, only service globally because nobody else can pull from the bank account automatically. So that's pretty cool. And our fees are 60 to 80% lower than Coinbase on automatic purchases. So yeah, check it out. swanbitcoin.com/BTCPay if you want to have 25% of our fees donated to BTC Pay Server, which is an awesome open source project. And you'll also get $10 of free Bitcoin when you sign up. Shill complete. Maddie G.
Yay.
Was that fun?
That was super fun.
Dude, what a cool guy, right?
Yeah. Great conversation.
I
Really
love
cool
Billy.
guy.
Yeah, we don't agree on everything, but that's okay.
No.
This is a space
That's what it's all about.
for having some chats, and yeah, that was really enjoyable. It's good to see you.
You too, brother.
Loving the new format, and let's do this again soon.
Okay, sounds
Bright
good.
Orange Future, we are out.
Signing off.